Yes. I love it. Killing, like always. Hey everybody, Joe Bergamini here, Sabian Education Network, and my guest today is an old friend and a world-class drummer, Mr. Daniel Glass. Welcome, Daniel.
Great to be here, Joe. Glad we got it all together.
Yeah, I'm so happy, and thanks for giving us an hour of your time. And that video was from the Modern Drummer Festival from a few years back.
10 years to be specific. Yikes.
10 years, of course, predating, I just want to say right up front, predating your being with Sabian, of course, which is why you saw some different cymbals there. But,
yes.
But then everything worked out, the universe worked out, and now you're with Sabian, so it's all good.
You know, it took a little while for everything to align, but I'm exactly where I want and need to be right now, which is beautiful.
That's right. So welcome, everybody. Let me turn on the comments so I can see what you guys are saying. Hey guys, a lot of our regulars are joining in, great. And I'm sure you'll have great questions for Daniel, but we have a lot to talk about. So for those who don't know all there is to know about Daniel, just a few things up front. A world-class drummer, has toured all over the world with Royal Crown Revue, his group, has also played with people like Brian Setzer, Bette Midler, Liza Minnelli, Jose Feliciano, and many, many more. One of the most knowledgeable and respected drum historians in the world. We had actually the pleasure of working on a little project together for Hudson called The Roots of Rock Drumming, which is this book right here that Steve and Daniel edited, and I just kind of took a high view of it. So I got to witness his genius in action there. So that was great. And of course, Daniel's an award-winning player. He's been awarded Best R&B Drummer and Modern Drummer, and over the years was also, interestingly, the house drummer at the Birdland Club, famous Birdland Club. How long have you done that, Daniel?
About 9 years, 9.5 years. I mean, we sadly haven't been able to do it since March, but yeah, it's been an amazing run, and it's an amazing night in general. I mean, I was like, I'll just tell the story super briefly. I moved to New York from Los Angeles in 2010, in fact, just a couple weeks before the Modern Drummer Festival, and about 6 months later, somebody invited me down to this Monday night gig at Birdland, and they said, "Well, it's like an open mic night, but the piano player is Liza Minnelli's music director, and all these heavyweight people come in, and they don't have a drummer, so just come in and sit in, and you could be a guest." You know, they knew the guy that was the booker, so I sat in, and I literally never left. I sat in for one tune. And I stayed the rest of the night, and they're like, "You want to come back next week?" And I just kept coming back. And after like a few weeks, they just started paying me, and I've been there ever since. And it's just an incredible experience. It's hard to describe, but I'm in a house trio. It's technically an open mic night, but like, you know, unbelievable people. Liza Minnelli, Bette Midler, John Pizzarelli. I mean, the list goes on and on of Kenny Loggins, Art Garfunkel, like, the people that come through and sit in on this gig. It's like the world's most heavyweight open mic. And it's led to a lot of wonderful things in my career. And it's great to just be on at Birdland for 2 to 3 hours without a break. You never know who's watching. You never know who's going to be there. And you got to just nail every tune with zero preparation or rehearsal. So it's sort of like going to the gym for me, where it's like the stakes are high. Right. You know, it's a good New York experience.
Daniel, I'm just going to put my microphone on because people are saying my audio is a little low. Hopefully that'll be better. Let me know in the comments, guys, if you can hear me okay. I just wanted to make sure I was a little louder. That's amazing. So everybody should go back and see you when things open back up, and see you at Birdland and take that in, because I'm sure it's plus the feeling of playing in that club with all the history of what's gone down there over the years must just be amazing.
I still pinch myself like every frickin' Monday, you know, and I go in the dressing room and there's just like pictures of Charlie Parker and Miles and Billie Holiday, and the walls all over the club are literally like floor to ceiling, practically covered in photographs of all the amazing jazz artists that have played there over the years. And I'm just like, okay, I get to be here. Amazing. Like, awesome, you know, but I take it really seriously. I mean, I feel like a fire under my ass every Monday, like you can't believe, just because it's like, you know, it's a make or break kind of a thing. I feel every week, like the pressure's on, you know, and I like being in that position, because it's like, It's really good training, not only, for, obviously we want to stay sharp with our playing, but in band skills, following a musical director, interaction, and just every song hitting the reset button, and saying, okay, this is going to be a completely different experience. That's what we try to do as the house trio. We never phone it in. We're on each other's cases about it. And it's sort of like, going to the studio, going to the gym. I like to say it's my workout night, because, I like to talk about having like what I call concentration chops. We have our chops, our hands and our feet, but also concentration chops where, like, when you're doing a gig, staying really focused the whole time and not sort of letting your mind wander. Because we all know, we've all been to gigs where that's happened, and we see the drummer's mind wander, and then all of a sudden the music just loses it,
Yeah.
So anyway.
That's actually a really interesting thing that you bring up. I've noticed on certain gigs, like when you're in the heat of battle, especially if you're improvising and you don't know the material as well, or there's different people coming in and out, as compared to, let's say, a Broadway show, right, where you know all the music that's going to be played, different challenge. But I've actually found that when I'm in the heat of having to focus on the MD, follow the chart, catch the figures, my mind doesn't have time to trip me up with some technical things that might get tripped up when I know what's coming, which I find to be really interesting. So it's a different challenge, and it creates a different set of pressure, but it's something you have to just throw yourself into it to know what it's like.
Yeah, it's and I've there are lots of gigs like that around, and I encourage people, if they are up to the challenge and up to the task, to go for it. Being in a house band, is an incredible experience, and whatever the situation, and it's a good way to challenge yourself and be like, am I going to really be on it? Am I going to call out my bandmates and make sure they're really on it, so that, because that's part of what makes the gig so great. We're not just nameless, faceless people in the background. Like, our goal is like, and we get everything. There's a lot of Broadway people, so a lot of Great American Songbook, a lot of pop singers, a lot of jazz. Obviously, Dave Koz comes in, and John Pizzarelli, and they'll do instrumental tunes. And then we get a lot of Nashville people. So we'll do country tunes. We'll like Sarah Bareilles type music, sort of singer-songwriter, contemporary stuff. A lot of Jason Robert Brown, who's more on the cutting edge of Broadway musicals, where there's a lot of odd time signatures. And like maybe 90% of the time, I don't get a chart. So I literally have to telegraph off of, and we have two main MDs that generally do the gig. Billy Stritch, as I said, was Liza Minnelli's musical director for a long time, and a guy named Ted Firth, who's Michael Feinstein's musical director, and they're both insanely good at what they do. And so it's about, within 5 seconds, catching the vibe, knowing kind of what the singer's vibe is. Is it like a greasy, low-down, bluesy shuffle? Is it a singer-songwriter thing? And then immediately putting it in that bag as if we've been playing that material for 10 years. That's my goal on that gig, is to just like bring it, and then within 5 seconds, create a completely unique mood to that particular song that is stylistically appropriate to the era that it comes from, then really supporting the singer or whoever the guest is. But people come for the band as much as they do for the, for whoever might sit in. I mean, that's obviously like, oh, who's going to be there tonight? But like, they know that it's going to be an awesome experience with the band. So,
that's great.
I'm grateful for it. It's really made my New York experience like really significant, and obviously it's led to a lot of other work, which has been great.
Mm-hmm. Well, you wouldn't be able to create that mood without the massive knowledge of history that you have, and I have a lot of things I want to ask you about. But before I put this away, speaking of history, The Roots of Rock Drumming is just such an amazing read. You want to just talk briefly about your work on this book, and basically why people should read it. It's Hudson Music Book, The Roots of Rock Drumming.
Well, the book is 23 interviews with a variety of amazing pretty much everyone in the book is a legend. Literally, I'm not speaking figuratively out my butt, incredible roster of guys that Steve Smith and the guys at Hudson have been working on since I think the very end of the 90s or the early 2000s. And their original goal was to make a Hudson originally in earlier days had put out a 2 or 3 volume set called The History of Jazz Drumming. They got all these great old clips, and they wanted to do something similar, the history of rock drumming. Unfortunately, once they got into British invasion type guys and stuff like that, the licensing was too crazy. That's Idris Muhammad. So what they did was they had done all these interviews with all these guys, and they decided to write a book. But the project kind of got shelved. I moved to New York in 2010. I did the Modern Drummer Festival, and in doing that, I got to know Rob and Paul pretty well, where I really hadn't known them that well before. I had already gotten to know Steve because Steve was doing his History of the U.S. Beat DVD, and he had consulted with me, and we had gotten to be friends around the whole subject of drum history. So they invited me to come on board and to take this mass of interviews and edit them down. And I contributed a couple of the interviews that I had done. And so the book kind of runs chronologically, starts with the drummer for Bill Haley and the drummer for Louis Prima, who really were, you could call them like proto-rock drummers. They were around really even when rock was still just a patchwork of rhythm and blues and other styles. And then we interview, the guys who played on all the Sun Records stuff with Jerry Lee Lewis and Johnny Cash and Elvis and Buddy Holly. We have Sandy Nelson, who was like a star as a drummer in the 50s, as a teen star. We move forward with a lot of the New Orleans guys: Earl Palmer, Idris Muhammad, John Boudreau, Smokey Johnson. I mean, it's insane. And we continue to move forward. There's so many guys I can't remember everybody's name, but Roger Hawkins, who was the drummer with the Swampers down in Muscle Shoals. Sam Lay, who was at Chess Records in Chicago. J-Mo, who was with the Allman Brothers. Before that, he was down at Muscle Shoals as a studio drummer, knew Dwayne Allman and all these guys. So it's like, and then we come forward and we get some guys at the end like Carmine, who obviously was around in the 60s, the late 60s. Carmine's interview is incredible. There he is. We get Bernard Purdy, unbelievable interview about the world of New York in the 1960s when he was a young, aggressive, up-and-coming studio guy and the stuff that he did. Then we get Keltner. We get Gadd. And, and Keltner's interview was the last interview, and it's really like the most inspiring of them all because he not only, he played with 3 out of the 4 Beatles and, was there and has been on a million records, but he was also like in the session when Al Jackson Jr. played on Ain't No Sunshine. He was in the room, he was a young cat fly on the wall at Gold Star Studios in LA. So, he told me about this song called With This Ring, which is a Platters tune. And people know the Platters from like Smoke It's in Your Eyes from the 50s, doo-wop group. But they were still going in the 60s. And this song, With This Ring, is from 1964, same year as the British invasion. And Bernard is playing drums on it. And you can't believe what an amazingly fantastic drum track it is. And by the way, you hear the Purdy shuffle already on there. It isn't a halftime shuffle yet. It's a full-time shuffle, but he's already doing it. And he lays in some fills that are like, you would never hear a drummer do this in 1964. But Jim Keltner, who was driving from Oklahoma to LA in 1964 to come and be a part of the LA world, he's hearing that kind of stuff. He doesn't know who the drummer is. So, Keltner gives us perspective of the whole entire era. And it's just, it's an incredible, incredible book of interviews. There's a DVD that goes with it that is like 3 hours and 45 minutes of raw footage from a lot of these interviews, from the videos that they did. And you get to kind of see these guys kind of in their native habitat, as it were. It's just fantastic. It's such a great project, and you did an amazing job on it. And it was a labor of love. It probably took us like 8 months or something to get it all put together, right? Once we actually started working.
My job was easy because you and Steve basically did all the heavy lifting with putting it all together. It's funny how certain tracks come up in the discussion. I'm working on the early stages of a project about Jeff Porcaro. I can't talk about it or someone would have to kill me. But anyway, and with this ring is mentioned in there because of course Jeff Keltner was like Jeff's hero, and then they became best friends. And like it's just one of those iconic tracks that I don't think is on everybody's radar. But you hear all these people talk about that's like a touchstone track. It's so funny that you brought that up today because I was just reading something last night where Jeff was talking about that track.
It is, and I did a whole study, and I know Bernard now pretty well, and just seeing the evolution of that famous shuffle, you know, starting. I mean, he obviously was already using it all the time in '64, and he talks about it in his interview. Yeah. So it's. I mean, I just love this stuff. You know, it's like this is us. This is our history. This is like, you know, and I go way back with it much further. But I've interviewed guys from the 1930s. Louis Bellson was a good friend of mine, and a guy named Johnny Blowers, who back in 20 years ago was already in his 90s. And he showed me press roll patterns he had learned from Zutty Singleton, who's like one of the original New Orleans drummers to bring that style of playing up the Mississippi River. I mean, it's like, I love it. I'm a total geek for it. And I think it's just so important because one of the things I love about sharing our evolution as drummers with drummers today, my goal is to help them feel a part of something that's bigger than just what they're doing now, or just like who their hero was that's around today, around 10 years ago. It's like we're all part of this amazing journey of drumming together. And when I, learned all this stuff and was interviewing guys and really researching, and, I'm still doing it all the time because I'm always thinking about it. But I felt so much more connected, and I think especially now people are at home and, all these kind of things, and stuck at home and not able to play gigs and this sort of stuff. Like, it's important that we feel connected, even in this era where we're all looking at screens all the time. It's just like connection is really important, Yeah. So that's how I try to contribute to the greater connection of the community.
Yeah, and it's, what you're doing is so effective, and there have been some great comments here coming through about your Century project and how amazing that's been. But what's terrific is that, it sounds corny, but I remember as a kid going to early modern drummer festivals, and, everyone in the audience, the jazz drummers, the metal drummers, the rock drummers, whoever it was, the audience always accepted and loved hearing all the different styles. And we've always been open as drummers. It's a cliche, but I always felt it was true year after year, all these festivals. And these kinds of books can help you go a long way besides just learning the grooves out of a drum book. Although those are great too, and that's going to be, you segued me perfectly into the next thing, but that's one of the greatest things about it's almost like practice. You're learning these things, and then if you're on a gig and, something gets called from an earlier era that might seem simple. It's never as simple as it seems. It's always about getting into, and I remember, just to give you thanks, I had to do Sing, Sing, Sing at a concert. I don't know if you remember this. And you talked to me about, I was talking about what Gene played, and you pointed out the snare drum technique of keeping time that Gene was doing in the early days pre-cymbals. And I was like, man, I feel so legit now. And that I should have probably given you a commission on that gig. Sorry about that, but it was so helpful.
Good.
It was just awesome.
Was it a success?
Yeah, totally.
Was it a success? Okay, great.
But awesome. I do want to segue right now into something people can use from you right now. It's been in the SEN newsletter for 2 or 3 weeks now. You're offering a shuffles course. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that? And I can share your site if you like. People can see the front page while you're talking.
Yeah, people can get to it to sign up for it. Just go to my website, danielglass.com, to the front page. There's a little graphic right on there that says shuffles. So hard to miss. People who know me or have followed me or been familiar with my career know that I'm a fanatic for shuffles. It's an interesting story because when my very first professional gig, I was fired. It was a blues gig. It was my first real band where it was a touring band, and it was a blues artist. And, I wasn't as up on the blues as I should have been. I mean, it's hard because I was just a couple of years out of music school. I was just really a year out of music school. So, but it was my first real, like, okay, we're going to go on the road and all this. And this was a well-known, her name is Debbie Davies. She's a great a female blues guitarist. She had been in the band of Albert Collins as a second guitar player, who was Albert Collins, one of the legendary, true legends of electric blues. And so I went on the road and I was doing my best, but after a couple of weeks, they were going to go to Texas, and I was all excited. And she called me and she was like, your shuffle is just not that strong, so we're going to take somebody else. And as crushed as I was like, okay, I better get my act together. And then it just seems like fate kept throwing shuffles at me, because the next sort of big project I would get involved with would be Royal Crown Revue, the band that I was with for about 20 years. And that band was all about shuffles too, but different than the shuffles of Debbie Davies. So once I got in Royal Crown, I started to really understand shuffles. And, for those out there who have ever played shuffles, which probably is almost every kind of drummer, shuffles are not easy to play. It's this uneven da, 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 da. That's the basis of the time you have to create, the feel you have to create. And I think that in the case of a lot of drummers, and I talk about this a lot in the course, but the shuffle is sort of like the big hairy monster in the closet, right? And it's like, well, I'm not really good at these, and I'm just playing rock stuff or just, whatever. So I'm just I'll come up with something. Maybe I could do a Purdy shuffle or a halftime shuffle or a rock shuffle, but I'll just get by with that. And you never really deal with the shuffle, and that monster gets bigger and hairier and scarier in the closet. And, over the years, I've written a book with Zorro, of course, who's a mentor of mine. And we wrote a book together, 11 years ago now, The Commandments of Early Rhythm and Blues Drumming. Just happen to have a copy right here. That's what that looks like. That's the great Sonny Payne on the cover. But this is the Shuffles Bible. And the idea was that my styles of music, I was playing with Royal Crown Revue. We played a lot of stuff from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And this book, and Zorro's book, starts up in the 60s. So this was kind of a prequel to Zorro's Commandments book. And it really, I just really dove into shuffles insanely deep. I would get up every day and practice shuffles at 50, which is like da, 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 and try to make it groove at that tempo, which, as you can imagine, isn't easy. But I became obsessed. And so I've been since I moved to New York, I've been doing online education. A lot of people are just jumping in now, but I know you've been doing it for a long time. I've been teaching online for years, because I would go to foreign countries and do clinics or whatever and meet guys and gals, and they'd want to take lessons. And obviously there was no way they were going to get to New York. So I just started doing it. And, as we've been moving along, a lot more the online, what you're able to do now online and how you're able to present yourself. And there's a lot of people that have online, schools and all that kind of stuff. So I've been looking at getting into this, but I've been so busy as a player, thankfully, and doing and teaching privately that I haven't been able to put all this stuff into place. So when the whole, New York City comes screeching to a halt, and it's like, okay, you're going to lose all your gigs for the next, I've lost everything right now. They're still canceling on me through September, and here in New York, we've had it rough. So, it's going to be a while until clubs and things, I think, are open. Maybe other parts of the country are luckier. But I was like, damn it, I'm going to do this. So literally 2 days before, I didn't know we were going to lock down. I ran and I got some lighting gear, and I went to a buddy of mine's house, and I put together this course all about shuffles. And the idea is that, again, another misconception is that people think that shuffles are just for blues drummers. Well, if I'm a rock guy playing a classic rock band, I don't really need to know much about shuffles. And what I point out in the course is that shuffles are in every style of music. I don't care if it's rock, jazz, funk, blues, soul, hip hop, reggae. I mean, reggae music is based on American shuffles. If you are weak at shuffling, let's make it positive. If you're good at shuffling, you're going to be more employable. And, everybody complains today, well, there's not many gigs and not many opportunities. And yes, that is the case. But, this is why I'm nonstop talking to people about the idea that the more you know about styles, the more you know about history, the more you have context to what you do, the more employable you're going to be. And it's just, that's why I work 200 gigs a year in one of the most competitive markets in the world, and have for the last 3 years. Because when people do a gig with me, the comment that I get invariably is not like, dude, your chops are sick. I mean, I have some chops, but I don't even care about that. What I get is, dude, it was your groove was so comfortable. I felt so good. It was so easy to move to. This is what I want my bass players to tell me. This is what my band leaders to tell me. This is what I want the audience to tell me. And so, if you want to be employable, learning about the evolution and the history is important, and understanding shuffles. So what we do in the course is it's broken into like 5 or 6 units. Each unit has 5 or 6 videos. The first couple of units, we really get into the technique of how to get your shuffling to work. So I talk about stuff like the push-pull finger technique, talk about pulse. I throw this exercise in that I've been talking about for years called the throw up exercise, which is all about creating a really beautiful quarter note pulse that comes directly out of our evolution as drummers. In every style, you can hear it in, again, jazz and rock, all these styles, this idea of like giving your pulse this forward momentum, but making it feel laid back at the same time. And this exercise is what it's all about. So we tackle that in the first, couple of units, how to get your bass drum to shuffle. A lot of people, it's just hard to get any part. How do you get that on the snare drum? And how should you think about it? And how should you think about moving? And then we move into some more stylistic things. So there's a unit on, what I call the half swung, half straight shuffle. People call it playing between the cracks. This idea that a lot of shuffles from a lot of eras swing in different ways. And it's not all, either triplet based or, there's this like, if this is all triplets, da, 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 and this is da, 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 then what's in between here is any number of variations. And again, if you're going to play reggae music, you better know how that shuffles. If you're going to play, certain styles of blues, you better know how that shuffles. And so we try to open up in the unit. And I was fortunate last year to go to Russia. I did some clinics out there and had a really incredible trip. And one of the clinics was filmed really beautifully by the drum shop that hosted it. And so I grabbed a bunch of my demonstrations from that course. So then the 5th unit is all about the rock shuffle, which is kind of the shuffle that a lot of drummers know how to play, but we dig into some of that stuff. We get into some Jeff Porcaro variations on the rock shuffle. The tune that I use is actually not Rosanna, but much earlier from 1976, Lido Shuffle, the Boz Scaggs tune, which when I was 10 years old, I was like, that was my favorite song. And I have no clue who Jeff Porcaro was. I wasn't really even playing drums, but I just like it. That groove just grabbed me, right? Yeah. You probably know the tune. It's an awesome rock shuffle, and it's sophisticated. And then, I end up at the end of the last section, we bring it into the present. We talk about, funk shuffle and the halftime concept, which really we sort of could trace back to like maybe around Stevie Wonder, 1972, Superstition, although I'm finding earlier examples of it now. And, but that idea of the halftime shuffle has taken over in almost all forms of contemporary music, pop and in hip hop. It's all based on a halftime shuffle. So we sort of break down, and there's a lot of transcriptions and explanations and demonstrations. And here's the best thing, Joe. The course is free. I forgot to mention that. It's right. Absolutely free.
I'm showing the site, but so you go in here, you click on shuffles, and then it takes you right in. You just give your email and stuff, and then you're in, right?
That's it. One click. DanielGlass.com. Click once, and you're in to a free course. And my whole thing is, hey, drummers, since we've been locked down, I know we're kind of coming out of it now, but, a lot of us aren't going to be having any gigs for a while. Now is the time. Tackle shuffles. Get into it. And I should say now, I can safely say we've had about 1,250 people sign up for the course so far, and the response has been amazing. And I didn't know how it was going to go over. I didn't know if people were really interested. It's been awesome. And the interaction with everybody, people have just like really had an incredible experience. So I encourage everybody, it's probably not going to be free forever. I encourage you to go. I made it free because everybody lost all their work. And I sort of felt like, you know, just doing something cool for people while they were stuck at home with no money. You know, I didn't want to try to gouge people while they were down. So that's sort of the reason why. And also just to kind of introduce myself to a whole new bunch of people, the way I teach, the way I talk about stuff. I try to make stuff super easy, super clear, and demystify a lot of these things that, you know, the shuffle, I'm sure, mystifies a lot of people. Yeah. And it really isn't. It's just about kind of how are you moving? Well, let's check it out and let's kind of get this stuff happening. Yeah. So there you go.
Well, thank you for making it a free course. It's just so amazing. And I thought that was one of the reasons we decided to put it in the SEN newsletter. So you guys will get a reminder each week as I send out the week's plan. You'll get a reminder that Daniel's course is there. There's a little box at the bottom of the newsletter. You can just click on it. Takes you in. You know, it's so funny, Daniel. Because
if I may say just one more super quick thing about it, which is that SEN, obviously, the Sabian Education Network, is an amazing organization that Joe runs most ably. But it is for teachers. And if you are a teacher, you should get involved with SEN. You don't have to play Sabian. You don't have to be a Sabian endorser. Am I correct in this? It's like correct. For anybody, yeah. Right? It's a great network of teachers. And regarding the shuffle thing, again, I think a lot of drum teachers out there are kind of clueless as to how to teach shuffles. Maybe they can play them, but it is not necessarily, other than saying, well, get this limb to go da, 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 and get this one to do this and get your foot to do that. Just because you're getting your arms and legs to do stuff, it doesn't mean you're playing a shuffle, because by playing a shuffle, it means you're following through in the historical evolution of this groove and able to produce a feeling the way that those, you know, earlier and more recent records were able to. So teachers, this is great for you. You may have your own shuffle together, but you're going to learn a lot of stuff in the course about how that you could share with your students. Right. So that was the only other point I wanted to make.
That's great. And you also bring up a great point, which is that you can use an online course such as Daniel's course, just like a book. This can be another material you assign your students, a couple of steps in the course, you know, while they're also practicing their stuff out of their Zorro book or whatever book they're using. So that's another thing to keep in mind. You know, the thing that always crosses my mind as a teacher, and for those of our members who are out there teaching, I found that when I studied this stuff, it made me so much more effective at knowing how to advise my students. Because what I would get, I teach a lot of players that came up like me playing rock, and then they get on a gig and they have to play, you know, some of the drummers that are very steeped in shuffling and are very connected. So they'll have to play a Stevie Ray Vaughan tune. That's one that I hear a lot in bars where the drummer doesn't know how to shuffle, or he's playing something and the drummer, and it's Chris Layton, right?
A Little Richard tune or an Elvis Presley tune on a wedding, say, or something like that, you know?
Right, or even Bunny Carlos. I get a lot of people bringing me in the Cheap Trick tune, I Want You to Want Me. I think it is like, you need to know how to swing to play that, even though they're a famous rock band. So it all connects, you know?
Absolutely right. And it's interesting because in this book, the Commandments book, which is the Shuffle Bible, which, by the way, I made selling at a 20% discount right now while the course is free. So even a better reason to go check it out. But at the beginning of the book, I list, I think it's like, I don't know, 50 songs here, 57 early R&B hits. And I talk about the popular remake that you might know. So the version by the Beatles, or the version by the James Brown, or the Animals, or the Rolling Stones, or Led Zeppelin, or Madonna, or Cheap Trick, there it is, or Foghat, or Aerosmith, you know, or Stevie Ray Vaughan, or David Lee Roth, and how every one of those tunes actually is an early R&B tune, which is what the era is here, and how much that music is still all around us. You know, this, people might say, well, I'm a 21st century drummer and I play modern stuff. And it's like, you're going to encounter it. I kind of guarantee you 100%, you know, it almost, unless you're in like a band that does nothing but play blast beats, if you play any other styles of music, or if you are, you know, play in bars or any kind of public events, weddings or corporate events or whatever, this repertoire is alive and everywhere. Yeah. And people want to hear it. And again, if you do it well, it's going to make your band be successful, and you're going to keep the gig. You're going to be the person that they want on that gig, you know? And this is another thing I tell drummers, and it's a little bit off the topic just of shuffles, but you know, if you're playing a gig where there are dancers, I don't care if they're disco dancers, I don't care if they're swing dancers, whatever the era of material that you're playing that they're dancing to, watch the dancers. Your job is to make the dancers move. And too often drummers are just in their own little bubble, right? We're just thinking about, okay, here's what I do here's the verse. And now how's this feel? Oh, that's pretty cool. All right, now here's the chorus section. Hello, you're part of a band. You're playing a song, you know? And the goal of that song is to connect with an audience. And if you're not connecting with the audience, they are not going to come back. They're not going to dance. You are not going to work, you know? So again, it's like, it seems obvious, but when we're in the heat of battle, like you're saying, just so often drummers' priorities, I'm not really sure where they are, you know?
Right. Well, also another fun thing, you know, all of us do gigs, whether they're corporates, club dates, where we have to play the classics. I mean, I'll take a tune like Rock Around the Clock. I mean, I just know coming up, you know, I came up listening to, you know, Van Halen and Rush and bands where the drums were really clearly recorded in a style that I sort of like got grounded in. So you go back to Rock Around the Clock, it's like, there's that clicking, like you can't tell if it's the hi-hat. So Dan, you've studied this stuff, right?
The bass.
So
it's the upright bass. A lot of people think that people in rockabilly and early rock and roll music, you're clicking the rims. No, I interviewed all the guys that are on all those recordings, and not one of them clicked the rims. Instead, you had a very strong upright bass player, because why? Rockabilly and some of these styles come from country music. There's a strong country element. There were no drums in country music. That particular style of music did not embrace the drum set, and it didn't even embrace drums as being part of the band. But the bands still created an extremely strong sense of rhythm. So there's all these different ways that they did that. And if you're going to play something that emerged out of that style, then you better be aware of that, you know?
Right.
So, you know.
We can go down a wormhole so easily, but I have more things I want to ask about you. But, you know, and then there's the whole, like, if you're playing at the hop and like the drums are straight, but other people are shuffling, it's like, you know, it's so deep. But I would say everybody take the course. And guys, thanks for your great comments.
Yeah, Chuck Berry, Johnny B. Good. If you listen to all the early Chuck Berry stuff he did on Chess Records, Chuck's guitar is chunking along with straight eighth notes, but the drums were mostly a guy named Fred Bilo, who was one of the Chess Records house drummers, who was a jazz guy, and probably he was like, I don't really care what this young punk is playing, because Chuck Berry wasn't known as anything at that point. He was just a young artist who probably had a lot of attitude and was playing loud blues. And Fred Bilo just plays a regular shuffle behind him. Go listen to Johnny B. Good. What makes that work is that the piano player, who was Chuck's piano player, he sort of played somewhere in between. He was the lukewarm water, as it were, to quote Spinal Tap. And, you know, kind of he was between the fire and the ice. And he helped to pull it together. But, you know, if you want to play these things and give them kind of an authentic feel, read the Earl Palmer interview in the Roots of Rock Drumming book. He talks about his work with Little Richard. And, you know, the very first track they ever did was Tutti Frutti, one of Little Richard's biggest hits. And he's playing a shuffle. And he said, I went back and listened to the playback after we were done, and I realized that Little Richard wasn't playing straight, or he wasn't playing swung eighths. He wasn't a technically advanced piano player. He was just, Little Richard, we know, had tons of energy. So he was just hammering that thing, and it was more of a straight feel. So Earl Palmer began to modulate what he was doing with his own feel, and he started to straighten out his cymbal feel. And that's, you know, that, I mean, those Little Richard records really are the ones that all the British Invasion guys heard those. All of the guys down in Memphis, J.M. Van Eaton, who was the house drummer at Sun Records, and DJ Fontana, Jerry Allison, who was Buddy Holly's drummer. Little Richard was just a year or two ahead of all those guys, and they heard that stuff, and they started copying Earl Palmer without knowing who Earl Palmer was. Right. And then Earl Palmer goes in 1957, he moves to L.A. and does every rock record out there starting in 1957, So anyway, I digress. wormhole. The wormhole invites me. I'm not going to go there though. They have to read the book. Trust me, you'll love these books. Get the other one out.
Yeah,
and this one too. This is like years of research, people. This book is what? 250 pages.
Yeah.
This is 150 pages. Don't be scared. You'll have a great time reading it. It's good reading. And there's CD or DVD that comes with each one. There's play-alongs on the Commandments book. I mean, there's a lot for that you can get involved with for frickin' 20% off, people. Come on.
Yep. Absolutely. And it's so great because you can most everybody can put this stuff to use right away, and they're playing on the gig, and it's great. And by the way, if you're ever in Memphis, go to Sun Studios. It's like mind-blowing to get in.
Can I just tell you, J.M. Van Eaton, who's the drummer on Great Balls of Fire, all the Jerry Lee Lewis stuff, and he played on like 2/3 of all the recordings that were done at Sun. He's a friend of mine. I did a clinic with him a bunch of years ago at Jim Pettit's place, the Memphis Drum Shop. Yeah. And the two of us were on camera together and talked about grooves and cymbals and whatever else. And then he's like, yeah, I got a session over at Sun. You want to come? And I was like, yeah. So we go over to the original Sun studio where so much of this incredible music, Elvis, Jerry Lee, Johnny Cash, Carl Perkins. And it just so happens that he was recording with a European piano player who's a Jerry Lee fanatic. And so they were playing Jerry Lee Lewis songs in Sun Studio. I am standing in the room. I'm like Jim Keltner at Ain't No Sunshine, I'm standing in the room, and I took some video. I have video somewhere of that moment. And I'm just like, I can't believe this is happening. JM is still around. He's still cooking. He's a great friend and a great guy, and he's in the Roots of Rock drumming.
Yeah. Daniel, the time just goes by so quick because you're so knowledgeable. This is so great. I just want to ask you, as a drum teacher, and for all our drum teachers here, you studied with some legends, Freddy Gruber, Bruce Becker, different teachers. Can you talk a little bit about those most influential teachers and how you teach today? What influence they had on you and your approach to it? I know whether some of it's online, some is in person. So,
well, when I was a younger player, I had already been playing for 15 years, and I'd spent a year at music school before I became a student of Freddy Gruber. And my whole time in all these experiences, I had many teachers. I sort of was feeling like, this is all great, everything I'm learning. I feel like I'm learning a lot of stuff, but I feel like there's some magic element that the guys that are doing the serious stuff, who create these incredible grooves and have this insane technique, they've learned something that I am not learning or that I'm missing out on. And sort of like when I was getting done with music school, I went to a place in LA called the Dick Grove School of Music, which is long gone, but guys of our age remember. It was like a Berkeley West, and it was happening around Musicians Institute. Musicians Institute was at that time was more of a rock school, and Dick Grove was more of like Berkeley, and there was incredible people. I got to study with Emil Richards for a year. Steve Houghton was there. John Ferraro was my fusion rock drumming teacher. Chuck Silverman, for those who remember Chuck, great Latin teacher. Incredible faculty, small school. So it was a great experience. But the studying I was doing about technique was almost nothing. It was just like, here's this style, here's this pattern, here's this exercise. And I felt like, and I still do feel, that so much of drum education doesn't talk about how we do these things, only what to do, right? And I think we could have a really long discussion about that. Steve Smith and I have talked a lot about when did we sort of become separated from the why, where technique would have been something that everybody learned right from the beginning. And how did it just get to be, okay, here's your first lesson, pick up these 2 pieces of wood, and here's how you play this song, right? And that's cool, it's fun, you get to the sexy stuff, but people don't really understand or have a relationship in a deep way with creating a sound, with holding the sticks in a consistent way, with moving between surfaces and striking, that they create something that is consistent and articulate, right? So when I a lot of people recommended Freddy. He was kind of an unknown name unless you were in the know around LA. This was 1992. I spent 5 years with him. It was a life-changing experience, and it was humbling. I'd played for a long time. I kind of thought I was hot shit. I was not, and the students that were walking through the door were like Ian Wallace, a guy named Danny Yamamoto. Bruce Becker was living in Europe at the time, but I met Bruce through Freddy and then studied, did more studying with Bruce later on when Freddy stopped teaching. Weckl was the big name. This was the early 90s. Weckl was revolutionizing everything. And I remember when Weckl, I wasn't there, but when he came and took some lessons with Freddy, and Freddy changed his whole perspective. So what I could say it's hard to sum it up quickly, but basically I'm sort of like somebody who goes to Weight Watchers and loses 150 pounds. And now I can't stop talking about Weight Watchers and how Weight Watchers not only can help you lose weight, but can change your life. Because usually when people lose weight, they change their whole life because that's what allows them to be a new person and change everything. Right. So what Freddy was able to do as a teacher, and he's kind of not well understood because he never documented what he did. He was one of those guys that was sort of cagey about sharing too much because he felt like somebody might take his stuff or something, which, was kind of ridiculous. But, he was an old school. The other thing is, as a historian, I was just joined Royal Crown in 94, and I'd already been studying with Freddy, and he knew everyone from Papa Joe Jones to Charlie Parker to Philly Joe. He and Philly Joe were like, drug buddies together. I mean, he was just a notorious, crazy jazz musician from that old school days. And by this point, when I got with him, I think he was in his late 60s. So he'd mellowed out a little, but he'd be up all night. The first time I called him was 11 in the morning, and he yelled at me for waking him up. That was the first. He was like, "What are you calling me?" And then he finally, a couple minutes later, he's like, "Come Tuesday at 5." And I was like, oh.
It's like being friends with Buddy. Same thing.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, and he was one of Buddy's best friends for their whole lives together. So, I didn't know. Basically, what I teach now, the fundamentals of it are what I got from Freddy, because I personally believe that I can do more of a service to people by showing them this material than I can showing them how to play this kind of groove or that kind of groove or this song or that song or this style. I don't do any of that. Over the years, I've gradually really moved in my own direction with it, where I bring a lot of the history in and trying to understand why, again, these things happen, why we want to move the way that we do. It's the way I talk about it is sort of like there's a concept called deliberate practice, which I talk about a lot in my teaching. And the idea of deliberate practice is that if we want to truly make deep molecular level change, then what we have to do is slow things down and simplify things to a ridiculous level. So many of the exercises, there's not even a stick. It's about moving your arms in certain ways and getting things to just feeling your body move. What was so genius about Freddy was he knew Jim Chapin well. He knew, he was around, obviously Henry Adler, who was another great teacher of the period. He knew, I used to see him at the PASICs, him and Chapin would be hollering at each other at closing time at the restaurant at 11 o'clock in some deep argument, or him and Terry Gibbs. He was a contentious guy, but, he synthesized so many things and he didn't just grab stuff from other teachers. He created something, I think, that was his own thing. People talk about Murray Spivak, who's a great teacher. He kind of had his own thing. People talk about Morello. You have kind of schools that come down from these. And I really think Freddy had a very unique thing that was about how you move and thinking about things like grips and fulcrums. But if we can begin to move as the body naturally wants to move, then playing will be as easy as breathing or walking. And I know that sounds really conceptual, but when students come to me, and by the way, I've never really advertised heavily for teaching, but I teach, probably around, same as you, I have around 50 to 60 hours a month that I teach. And it's very in depth. It's very focused. It is unlike any kind of experience that you'll have. But what it did for me was it took me from somebody who played the drums and turned me into somebody who has such a deeper understanding of what the instrument is, of creating a sound, of understanding pocket. To me, like, people talk about the term pocket, and it's always thrown around, but nobody really has a step-by-step method to teach you how to have a great pocket. That is all I teach. That is everything. To me, pulse, pocket, all has to do with, and I know we need to take questions and stuff, but here's the idea in a nutshell about what I teach, is that we have a perfect force pushing down on us called gravity. We have arms and legs that are heavy. We control them with our muscles, but if you were to pick up like a disembodied arm, I would say if you were Tony Soprano and you were cutting up bodies and had to go bury them, you'd realize like an arm or a leg is heavy. Like, they're heavy. So we have this heavy, I'm back.
I'm trying to get just you.
Arm, and we have a perfect downward force called gravity. So if we could begin to understand about the up, the preparation for coming down, and we simply allow the down to happen, then what will happen is we will land naturally, easily, effortlessly, and perfectly in the right spot every time. And that's whether we're playing a stroke, or we're playing a tap, or we're playing a rudiment, or we're playing a groove, whether we're using our arms or our legs. It doesn't matter what. Are you still there, Joe? Maybe Joe yeah. Okay, you are still there.
Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
You just disappeared off screen for a minute.
Yeah, I did that because I thought you were showing some hand stuff.
Oh, I'm just flailing around. But anyway, and so now I would say I've been teaching online. See, the other challenge about online teaching is how do you get somebody to experience something without you being there to be able to like manipulate them? And I'm sure you have this experience. So everything that I've done now, I've developed a very systematic series of exercises where we take it step by step. Deliberate practice means you break things down and you master very small pieces and you slowly build, So the analogy I like to give is, you have a Ford and a Ferrari. Both of them do exactly the same thing. They get you down the road. They get you from A to B. They both can do 70 miles an hour. So what is the difference? Why is one car 30,000 and one car 300,000? So it's the same with drummers. Why is it that Steve Gadd, when he goes, frickin' James Taylor hires him, and Shaka Khan, and this one and that one, and Chick Corea, Whereas when we go, everybody goes, yeah, that was all right. So, it's the Ford versus the Ferrari. So literally what I do as a teacher, my goal is to take drummers from being Fords and turn them into Ferraris. And I know that sounds kind of audacious, but that, to me, what else is there? Like, if we have an amazing pocket and we know our history, we will be way employable, and I'm proof positive, so that's basically what I can say about how I teach.
Wow.
And part of the online course thing is I'm going to hopefully begin to take some of that and create courses where it's not going to be as expensive as taking private lessons, and people can begin to dig into that in a larger way.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's great. You make this really easy. I only have to ask you like 3 things this whole time. But I
like to talk.
No, it's great. I love, you're just so smart. And all of our friends who are watching, I love doing these because all you guys are so funny. I'm watching these comments, Mike walks like Joe's Italian. He knows where the bodies are buried. You're talking about and all these guys. So if you come back later, you can see there's not too many questions, but you can come back and address some of them. But thank you guys for all of our listeners for being so funny and
this is awesome.
So the last place I want to come, and of course, I'm able to interview you and so many other great guests because of Sabian, thanks to Sabian. So with all that you do, with all your playing, all the different things that you play, what are your Sabian sounds? What are you using?
I've fallen in love with the artisan elites. For years, I've been looking, playing around with cymbals. Obviously, I like dark sounds. I like dry sounds. Mostly the work that I do is as a jazz musician and a swing musician. So I like rich, explosive, but they don't stick around forever kind of sounds. I like, you know, a lot of the classic bebop cymbal sounds and swing cymbal sounds, whether they're on the hi-hats or on the ride cymbal. I like, you know, I'm a classic kind of guy, so I love, you know, stuff from the 60s and 70s where, you know, the cymbals just have this real earthy, dark tone, you know. You could say the Turkish sound. So the artisan elites are really amazing for that. In particular, at Birdland, and with, you know, a lot of the people that come up are singers, and so we have to. What I've learned how to do the most, I would say, on that gig in the last 10 years, the Birdland gig, is to play, to be able to really burn at really low volumes. And it's taken a long time to be able to do that because you got to stay relaxed. Most drummers, you know, I always like to say, what are the two things that drummers hate most? Playing slowly and playing softly, right? And this gig, you got to play softly. My first couple months, I got yelled at, you know, for playing too loud by my fellow bandmates. And believe it or not, the owner of Birdland, he hates it when drummers play too loud. Really famous drummers have come in there and he's been like, that guy. I'm like, you're talking about so-and-so. What are you, crazy? And he's like, he's playing too loud. So if I want to keep my gig, I got to do what the boss wants. And so the artisan elites are dry, but they're beautiful. I use the Vic Firth ST4s a lot on the gig, which have like barrel tip and just a really beautiful, you know, kind of like, I like to say raindrops falling on concrete, you know, that kind of a sound. But what really knocked me out. Oh, also, by the way, I never even mentioned this. I also play with one of the Real Housewives of New York and tour with her. And that's been a gig that's fallen in my lap. Maybe some of the people out there know, or their girlfriends or wives watch the show, but the Countess Luann de Lesseps, who's kind of one of the notorious members of the Real Housewives of New York. And it's the weirdest gig. It, again, came through Birdland. It's a gig where we play her dance club hits with a 5-piece band, but we play them like as a smoke and funk band. And so we're laying down like 4 on the floor grooves. And it's been a super fun gig because she tours a lot. We play bigger venues, a lot of the same venues you do with the Midtown Men. So it's the same probably circuit, you know, that kind of. Sorry, do up.
See, we all play the same places, but yeah.
I know. Anyway, so sorry, man. But for that gig, I've been using the Evolutions, and I was lucky enough to have dinner with Dave Weckl at NAMM a couple years ago, and I just told him, dude, I don't know what magic, you know, what do they call it when the guys that turn stuff into gold?
Alchemists, right?
Alchemists. I'm like, I don't know what kind of alchemy you were doing, but those cymbals are unreal.
Yeah.
They're like great for rock. They're great for jazz. They crash great, but yet you can hit them hard, but yet they have a great explosion. You know, just like they're the greatest like all-around cymbal I've ever played. And, you know, they're just, I love the hats. I love the ride. I love the crashes. So I use those when I'm out with the Countess. And what's great is like, you know, you and I, obviously we have to send our rider out and they provide rental gear. And I just know that if I ask for the Evolutions, it'll be perfect. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's guaranteed. So that's another line that I love. And then I met and fell in love with what are they called? The Complex, the new Complex series.
Yeah. Again, one of the advantages of being on the team is I got a little preview of some. I'm not allowed to talk about them or I'll get in big trouble, but I have this ride over here. I don't know. Somebody might yell at me if I play it, but I will when they're released and but these HH Complex, these new, and they're not.
Well, they were at NAMM. They had them publicly displayed at NAMM, so I don't think we can.
So they feel a little bit to me like certainly not as dry as the.
No, they're a little. They have a little more.
But dark.
Well, I was standing with Mark Love. You know, was one of the great Sabian
alchemists,
hammerers, and at the booth, and he gave me the whole guided tour of these new Complex HH. And I unfortunately went back home, wrote an email to Chris, said, "Hey, Chris, you think I might be able to?" And probably before I got the email done, COVID descended on us. So that's my next. I want to get some of those. I came on board with Sabian. I was with Crescent and before that Bosphorus, and went through this whole chain where companies changed hands. And Sabian acquired Crescent, and that's when I became a Sabian endorser, which is probably at least 5-6 years now. I've been so happy. And there's just, it's great. It's a great team. I'm really happy. All the companies I'm with are really serious about education, and I think that's incredibly important because I take education. I don't just like do clinics to make money or show off my chops or whatever. I mean, I have a whole educational agenda, obviously, as you well know, and so it's important to me that I have a company that takes it as seriously as I do, and Sabian absolutely does that. The products are amazing, so I couldn't be a happier person right now. It's awesome. And Chris Stanky, I mean, is just the coolest artist relations guy you'd ever want to work with.
He's
period.
okay, I guess.
Yeah, and Dom is on the team, and you're on the team, and all on on the educational side, and that's awesome.
We're one big happy family, that's for sure. Well, Daniel, you're truly are a gentleman, a scholar, and just such an amazing friend to SEN, friend to me personally, friend to Sabian, and we're just thrilled that you gave us some time. Everybody, make sure you go to danielglass.com. I have it up here right on the screen. Check out that Shuffles course. Daniel's going to be in touch with you all individually to make sure that you did it right. No, I'm just kidding. But you should get a lesson. There's been a lot of your students here.
If you take the Shuffles course, every single of the videos has a comment section, and I will get back to you if you write a comment. I answer every single comment, and if you want to send a video of you demonstrating the exercise, I will give you feedback. So he ain't lying.
That's great. And as I say every week, go to sabianed.com. You guys, Dom and I had Bobby Sanabria on, and we have all these resources that Bobby, and Daniel, I invite you to share anything else you might want to. I'll do the same thing. Bobby sent recommended listening for everything he talked about, and my student Christian Johnson transcribed everything. Bobby was actually at his drums. So we have a transcription of everything that Bobby played. So we're starting to develop, as I can, I'm trying to develop follow-up resources. So if you watched us when Bobby was on, come check that out. And Daniel, I'm happy to share any follow-up resources that you have. Of course, you'll get a reminder in the newsletter about the Shuffles course because I've included that. And
just remember, people, it's free.
So no excuses. You definitely
no excuses.
And
sign it up and take it later.
And I do want to recommend if you go on Daniel's site, he has links to all his other great historical projects. He's just been the preeminent contributor to all this history with the Century Project and the Roots of Rock Drumming. So go check that out. And just real quick, the rest of this week, let's see. I'm excited. We have a 2-webinar week this week. We have the great Daphnis Prieto with me on Thursday at noon.
Super guy, insane player.
He's a eloquent, beautiful player and person, and I just
very deep thinker.
Yep, and he's going to be with me on Thursday at noon, right back here, and then Dom will be on. I think Dom has Kevin Lehman this week on his Spotlight. That'll be at 2 p.m. On Thursday, and then on Friday we have the roundtable at 2 o'clock. Our usual Dom and I usually always have great teachers on. I believe this week we have John Favicchia, and who's originally from Long Island, New York, and Kevin Stevens from LA, who teaches at MI. So we have a big week planned. So yeah, join in for that. And by the way, this was our first session that went live on YouTube as well. So that's going to be happening in the future. I think we'll be able to get some more sessions on YouTube. So you can go back to watch this session on YouTube if that's easier for you. And some people who aren't on Facebook have gotten to see it. We saw some comments, which is great. So,
so Joe, Daniel, I can share the session onto my Facebook pages, right?
Yeah, of course. We would love that. That'd be great.
Awesome.
So if any of you guys have questions for me or Daniel, Daniel's also a member of SEN, so he comes in and he does look at the site. So anything you want to follow up here in the comments or in the SEN site, I'll be happy to address that and get Daniel to answer if he hasn't seen it. And Daniel, just thanks so much. New York City is starting to open back up, so I'm hoping that we'll start to see. I mean, I know we're not going to have big gigs, but hopefully it's moving in the right direction.
Yeah, today is day one where New York is sort of opening up again, and I'm excited about it. And of course, we can't say anything, but you and I may be about to embark on a really exciting project as well together that, again, we cannot mention yet, but it's going to be, assuming it happens, it's going to be awesome for
That'd
both
be
of us
great.
to be involved, for sure.
Yeah, I'm hoping that does happen. Hey, and if you could always come out here to Jersey and we can wear our masks and social distance while we work on it in my yard.
Right. We'll go to an Italian deli and get
I don't
a
know
grind.
I don't know any good Italian delis around here.
No, I can't imagine. we go to the dog park.
Oh yeah, let's do that for sure. Daniel, thanks. Really appreciate it, man.
My pleasure, Joe. Thank you. It's always a blast.
Likewise, you're the best. You're always a pleasure to have on, and thank you. And all you guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for being a part of the SEN family. Dom will see you. I'll see you guys, and Dom will see you guys both on Thursday. Have a good day. Bye bye.